俺がイルレを倒したとして、もし新しいイルレが現れたら
Eyes fixed on Emma's expressionless face. Akira questioned her with a challenge in his voice.
もしかしたら俺が2代目のイルレになって、また麻薬を流出させるかもしれない。トシマだけでなく、この町にも。
Emma was not impressed. She laughed harshly, eyes staring down at him as he were a worm.
お前が富や権力のためにリーダーシップを発揮するというのか？面白い。お前についてのプロファイリングはすべて検証済みだ。群れでの行動は嫌いだろう。
Bullseye. He loved the aggravation that came with leading a group. He had no interest in being a drug king, nor in working for the government. But what he wanted even less than that was to rot away behind bars without ever clearing his name. And then there was a igra, a fight to the death. Not safe like Blaster, the victor will earn awe-inspiring renown, and the loser will pay for his weakness with his life.
選ぶ権利はお前にある。強制はしない。
Emma watched Akira with the eyes of falcon fixed on its prey. Slowly, Akira felt an emotion rise to fill his mind. It wasn't fear. It was a kind of determination, similar to curiosity or a wish long denied, which brought with it a quiet exhilaration. Igura would be the ultimate battle, one where Akira could give his all. He could fight until his life, and had been willed to the bone. He'd always wondered what would happen when his flesh reached its limit. His military training had taught him both how to kill and how to die, but that was all just theory. The war had ended before he could truly test himself. The void that not even Blaster could fill. Perhaps Igura might offer something to silence this gnawing emptiness. Either way, his life would be over the moment he turned down Emma's proposal. All that would await him then was a suffocating cell and the endless grin of torture. They would wear his body and heart down to nothing until he returned to the nameless dust that had birthed him. If he accepted her offer and succeeded, he would be free to go, clear of suspicion. Akira didn't need to weigh the options to know his answer. He slowly lifted his head to face the woman who was, for this one moment, his savior. He nodded without a word. Emma replied with an arresting smile.
成立だ。
それでは麻薬組織ビスキオとイグラについて簡単に説明させてもらう。
Quinn, who had kept silent the entire time, suddenly opened his mouth.
まずイグラのルールについて説明する。重火器の使用は禁止、殺人は可。先に背中が地面についたものを敗者とする。また一度参加したら棄権することはできない。参加方法はイグラを取り締まるアルビトロへ直接希望を伝えて参加賞となるタグを受け取る。タグは5枚1組。どれか1枚を必ず首から下げておかなければならない。他4枚は所持さえしていればよい。タグにはトランプと同じ数字と記号が割り当てられている。決められた種類のタグを5枚集めてアルビトロへ申請することでイルレへの挑戦権を獲得することができる。いつでも挑めるというわけではない。以上だ。
The way he let it out so smoothly, voice detached and businesslike, actually made it harder to understand. Akira gave him a sullen shrug.
要するに銃を使わず地面に背中をつけずタグを1枚首から下げ5種類のタグを集めればいい。
イルレへの挑戦権を獲得するために集めるタグの種類は
ポーカーと似たようなものだ。ロイヤルストレートと10以上のフルハウス。数とは関係ないがそれ以外は何を揃えても無効だ。
That meant either a group made up of a 10, a jack, a queen, a king, and an ace, or a set containing 3 tags of one rank and 2 of another, all 10 or higher.
面倒だな。
実際にはそれほどでもないだろう。烏合の衆にも通じるルールだからな。
出発は明日。武器、参加賞など必要なものはこちらで用意しておく。それまで自宅待機。監視をつけさせてもらう。
監視？
念のためだ。それに明日以降の手順についても連中に聞くといい。話は以上だ。何か質問は？
Leaning back in his chair, Akira regarded Emma expressionlessly.
不満なら。
Emma turned and slowly rose to her feet.
それでは健闘を祈る。
As she was about to leave, Emma looked over her shoulder and twisted her lips into a vicious grin. Akira cared a little about people's appearances, but even he thought this expression suited her better than any other. Akira wasn't sure what he imagined when they mentioned keeping an eye on him, but certainly nothing as ostentatious as this. A pair of men in black suits had been trailing after him ever since he'd left police custody. Their grim, tight-wound demeanor went quite at odds with Akira's casual get-up, and he found himself greatly discomfited by the looks passers-by kept giving them. It felt like being in a bad film. He hurried home, unable to withstand much more of it. By the time he reached his building, the sky was shifting to a deep blue hue. He went down the hall to his apartment and was about to stick the key in the door when he sensed them behind him and looked over his shoulder.
どこまでついてくるつもりだ。無駄口を叩くな。
His attitude was as haughty as his get-up. Akira heaved a sigh.
Akira!
At the sound of his name, Akira lowered his key and turned around. A figure in blue coveralls, Keisuke, was running toward him, panting. Once he reached Akira's side, he stopped and doubled over, shoulders heaving as he gasped.
アキラ、よかった。戻ってこなかったら警察に乗り込もうかと。
お前、ずっとここで待ってたのか?
It had been quite a while since the cops had hauled him off.
心配だったし、アキラ戻ってくるなら真っ先にここだろうと思って。
One of the suited men stepped forward, interrupting him. He stood between Akira and Keisuke like a wall.
不必要な接触は避けてもらおうか。
なんだよ、あんた。
お前に知る権利はない。
どけよ。
Keisuke tried to shove him out of the way, but the man didn't budge.
邪魔をするな。
The other man reached out to seize Keisuke.
それはこっちのセリフだ。
The two men turned at the sound of Akira's voice. Their movements were nearly identical.
これが最後になるかもしれないんだ。別れを惜しむくらいいいだろ。
He emphasized those final words. The suited man considered this for a moment. Finally, one of them muttered an answer.
10分だけだ。
わかった。ケイスケ。
His reply perfunctory. Akira exchanged looks with Keisuke and unlocked the door. He was about to enter the room when a colorless hand grabbed him by the shoulder.
待て。話だけならここでもできるだろう。
Annoyed, Akira shook the hand off and slowly turned around. Then he seized Keisuke's arm, pulled him close, and draped an arm over his shoulders.
ここじゃちょっとできないようなことをしたい仲なんで。
The man froze.
行こう、ケイスケ。
Even Akira himself thought his act convincing. It was amusing to see those cops at a loss. Akira closed the door slowly, dragging Keisuke, who was even more shocked than the cops inside.
なんだよ、それ。
Seated on the bed, his eyes so wide that Akira doubted they could open any further. Keisuke laid his hands at his sides and leaned forward in disbelief.
そんなの卑怯だ。ありえないだろ。豊島なんて。しかも途中でやめられないんだろ。死ねって言ってるようなもんだ。
拒否したところで終身刑だ。大して変わらない。
でも
Grimacing as if it were his life on the line, Keisuke cast his eyes downward.
どうにかならないのかよ。
He let out a low groan and flopped back on the bed. Akira hadn't planned to tell anyone about his mission. There was nobody he considered close enough for that. But now that Keisuke had seen him with his surveillance detail, Akira had opted to give him a short explanation. He and Keisuke had grown up in the same orphanage. They were what you might call childhood friends. Akira hated being tied down, but it wasn't as if being around other people repulsed him. It was just that most people kept their distance, unable to cope with his terse demeanor. But Keisuke wasn't like most people. He was always following Akira around. Though he was kind of unreliable, Akira didn't dislike his honest, some would say naive, personality.
ああ、もう
Keisuke sprang up all of a sudden, making the bed creak loudly.
なんだよ。
いや、俺がジタバタしてもどうしようもないんだけど。でも、なんか、いても立ってもいられなくて。
Akira, who was sitting by the wall, let out a small sigh.
俺の問題だし、俺が決めたことだ。
The light from the room's single lamp wavered, casting deep shadows over Keisuke's profile as he bit his lip and stared into space.
アキラは強いよな。
Still standing in the place, he murmured as if he were talking to himself, then exhaled a long, slow breath.
とっととタグ集めて、イルレとやらに勝ってくればいいだけだ。
Those words made Keisuke frown. Akira knew this fight wouldn't be easy, but if there was no other way, then his only option was to get it over with. Keisuke, why was he taking this so hard, even though it had nothing to do with him? Whatever happened would be the result of Akira's choices. Nobody else could change his fate. Despite that, seeing Keisuke like this made Akira wonder if he had a heart at all. Supposing their places were switched, will Akira be this worried about Keisuke? The answer was probably no. Several hours after he slid under his blankets, having finally sent the fretting Keisuke away, he awoke once again to the sound of his door slamming open. This was the second day in a row this had happened. He felt like he could justify being in a bad mood. He rose sluggishly, knitting his eyebrows at a pain in his head. Cold crept up from the soles of his feet. The digital clock atop his refrigerator told him that it was well before dawn. Unsatisfied with having interrupted Akira's sleep, his visitors came trampling through his room without any concern for courtesy.
起きろ、出発だ。
The same black-suited pair as before stood beside his bed, looking down at him. One of them tossed him a small, heavy bag. He opened it. Inside were solid emergency rations, 3 500ml water bottles, an envelope of money, a shaded knife, a phone, and a bundle of 5 dog tags, which would serve as a proof of his participation in Igura. Each tag was engraved with a number and a symbol, a 3 and a jack of hearts, a 6 and 7 of spades, and a 2 of clubs. According to the guy named Gwen, he had to take tags from the other participants and form an appropriate poker hand. In other words, the only meaningful tag currently in his possession was the jack of hearts. The remaining 4 were all junk. He needed a 10, a king, a queen, and an ace. Or, if he got another jack, he could also go for a full house.
どけよ。
Pushing the cup aside with both hands, Akira began making his preparations. Having 2 men stuffed into his already tight room made the process difficult. He stuffed a bare minimum of clothes into the bag's remaining space, then took a bottle of soda water from the fridge and gulped some down to wake himself up. Today is cool. Bubbly passage disagreed with him. As he finished getting ready, he happened to glance at the shelf. A knife in a worn-out leather shed was lying there. He picked it up, dusted off, and drew the blade, light and well balanced. It had a beautiful shape with a decorative engraving. Most of the design had been scratched away, but he could still make out letters at the blade's base, probably words in some foreign language. He couldn't remember how long it had been lying there. Vaguely, he recalled having received it during his military training, but he had a feeling it wasn't meant for practical use. It was much more durable than it appeared, though, and easier to use than some random knife. He kept it all this time because he liked how it looked. Might as well take it. Ease of use was important, and he was accustomed to handling this one, putting the knife the cops had given him on the shelf. He retrieved the more familiar weapon and stuck it through his belt. His preparations complete, Akira shouldered the bag and headed outside. He didn't bother to lock the door. There was nothing in the room that mattered. The morning sun was hazy, but still sufficient to make him squint at its brightness.
これから豊島へ向かうためのルートを説明する。
The man began explaining the way, his tone of voice suggesting that he was only repeating what he'd been taught. The road from the CFC to Toshima was all but straight, so there was no need to worry about getting lost. However, he will have to pass through several outer sectors of the old lands before reaching his destination. It will be difficult to make it there safely alone.
案内人を用意してやる。国境で合流しろ。
案内人？
少々雰囲気の変わった男だ。見ればすぐわかる。そいつがいれば、旧祖地区も抜けられるはずだ。
If this man could traverse the old lands, he must be quite capable. It all seemed rather suspicious, but with nothing else to go on, Akira reluctantly began walking toward the border. Even though the CFC had undergone a fair amount of reconstruction, the scenery became increasingly threadbare as he continued toward the suburbs. The gap between rich and poor continued to grow, and nowhere was that more readily apparent than in the contrast between these deserted houses and the structures built as part of the revival. This country abounded with needle stings, while everything important rusted away. He had never set foot in the old lands before, but he couldn't imagine how it could be worse. At last, he saw a dilapidated sign indicating that the border lay ahead. He spotted a human figure standing motionless beside him. The man looked at Akira with folded arms. This had to be the guide. While his clothing didn't especially stand out, he clearly wasn't from the CFC. He had a very different air about him. It was the quiet pressure exuded by those who have overcome the harshest trials. The chill ran down Akira's spine.
あんたか。俺を豊島まで案内してくれるのは。
Instead of answering, the man stared at Akira with eyes like a hawk. He couldn't look away. After a moment, the man wordlessly turned his back and began walking toward the old land set of the border. He creeped Akira out, but in the absence of any other options, the only thing to do was follow warily after. He'd heard it would take roughly a day to walk from here to Toshima. Though the way may have been straight, the distance involved was no small matter. The old lands lay ahead. At last, Akira felt his heart beat faster. Ruins as far as the eye could see. There was no other way to describe it. That was how far the old lands had fallen. The sky had still been bright and clear when Akira met up with his guide, but now clouds had begun to gather as though to mourn the wretched spectacle below. The shadows lurking in the wreckage of forgotten buildings were deep and darker than night. It was no maze, but take one false step and you would lose your way, condemned to wander for all eternity. Many who entered never emerged. There was another reason. No one tried to enter the old lands. The refugees were lying in wait. Refugees, the name for people who, after the war had ended, had found no place for themselves in the CFC or Nichiren. Instead, they had drifted to this blessed place. It was difficult to eke out a living in these ruins. It meant a constant struggle against starvation and death, which was why the refugees attacked anyone who tried to pass through, same as a pack of starved wolves. If they caught you, it was over. Hungry sights drifted past on the wind. Voices like a groaning animal, the sound of running feet. And he could see ruins and shadows. He could not distinguish the forms of the refugees. Akira found the atmosphere stifling, but the guide walked on without visible caution. Akira struggled to keep his eyes on the man. At times, he melted into the shadows and seemed to vanish from sight. Suddenly, he heard a strange noise. He stopped and focused on his surroundings. It was a grating sound, like that of someone scratching at iron, the kind of sound one might hear emanating from misshapen work of art. When he took a reflexive step toward it,
Kamana!
the guide spun without warning and dashed to his side. It was already too late by the time he wondered what it was. Something rushed out of the shadows from which the sound had come, moving at an incredible speed. The guide grabbed his arm, jerking his body to the side. A sharp, heavy wind shot past his shoulder, failing to lock into his prey. The surge of the wind planted its hands on the ground, flipping its body as it landed to face him. Akira could hear its ragged breath. He could see his eyes glowing in the darkness. Its throat rumbled. Though it seemed bestial, the silhouette on its hands and knees was shaped like a human being. Its presence multiplied. Another, and another, like cancer cells dividing. In a matter of seconds, the area was filled with slavering beasts.
バカがふらふら歩くんじゃない。
The guide said coolly, clicking his tongue as he came up beside Akira. He had a 15-centimeter army knife in hand. They were surrounded, trapped at the center of a steadily shrinking circle. The air was primed with tension, as they and their enemies watched each other warily. Succumb to the pressure or make one wrong move, and that will be the end.
こんなところで心中はごめんだ。
奇遇だな。俺もだ。
Standing back to back with the man, Akira glared at the creatures around them.
数が多すぎる。まともに相手をするな。
分かってる。
ブラスターのチャンピオンなんだろお前。なら楽勝だな。
Akira replied with silence. The growls were growing more ferocious, more insistent. He sensed the guy drop into a crouch. Akira did the same, sharpening his focus, determined not to miss the chance that would come. Eyes peered out from the ink-blank shadows, the eyes of predators, desperate for prey. In an environment such as this, reason was nothing but an impediment to survival. These creatures possessed human forms, but had cast aside their human hearts, and in doing so, had obtained strength to rival any beast. If they caught him, he was done for. Shifting his bag higher on his shoulder, he slowly closed his hand around the hilt of knife stuck through his belt. Behind him, he felt the guide's presence shift. Now,